near as I can tell, this camera is at least slightly useful. And considering it's free, that can't hurt. For some reason, the website is down that I usually use for a lot of the Plato links and everything. I checked last night and it was down. Hopefully not, but maybe they're just fixing something. But in any case, here's an alternate site. This is the Perseus project. The advantage of this is you have it in both Greek or, if they're a Latin text, in Latin. In fact, if you saw it, the originals are there, and you can look at it in multiple translations, usually in English or whatever, usually side by side, so that you can go paragraph by paragraph if you're interested in the original. And this isn't the full collection of Aristotle's works. On the other site, you actually get a lot more, like the gait of animals, and all sorts of other articles detailed about animals, that he literally measured the different characteristics of all sorts of different animals and so on. If you had the chance to look at the videos on Aristotle's Lagoon, which it's a beautiful set of videos, so please, if you get the chance, do that. You could even think of that as an alternate to reading if you don't have much time to read as well. In any case, the focus of that is on his biology, on his science, on how he did such detailed work on things. He made some mistakes. If you think about it, this is most likely the very first person to do this kind of analysis using his categorical thinking. How we conceive of a word as meaning a set of things, a definition, basically. And in fact, if you know the definitions of things and how they're related to other definitions of things, so for example, all horses are animals. How do you define horses? One of the characteristics is that it's an animal. How do you define animals? They're animate. They move, right? And so if you're taking all the different definitions and you're showing that all of these are in this set, and then all of these are in this set. All mares are horses, and so therefore all mares are also animals, right? And by the way, a true sentence is quite easy, really. I think I must have confused everybody by linking you to the square of opposition, the traditional square of opposition. The traditional square of opposition is neat because it shows you the four types of statements or sentences that can be true or false. But if you take a magic marker that doesn't work because there's no tip, and that was a true statement. See how that works, right? And you use what's called Venn diagrams, named after John Venn, a mathematician from Cambridge. By the way, as far as I understand it, they have windows made, with stained glass, with all the Venn diagrams in the chapel. So that's kind of neat, in honor of him. But so if I say all horses are animals, I'm saying that everything in the set of things that are horses are also in the set of things that are animals. So I say that there's nothing in this part of the set. And I'm diagramming it just the opposite as you would in some other classes where you fill in where there are members. In logic, we fill in where there are no members. So it's like, this is empty. All the horses are right in here. And they're also animals. And so that's a true statement. That's easy. So the point is, what a true statement is doing is helping you define it. Now, if you have a gelding, not all horses are geldings, right? And you say some horse is a gelding, right? since not all horses are geldings, I want to just say there's only one that I'm talking about that's also in the set of things that are gelding, right? So that's not an A statement, it's not an E statement, it's an I statement. Some are here, right? And that's how those work. So it's really just the easiest way you can think of, thanks to Aristotle, trying to figure out, well, what's a true statement? And in a sense, it seems like he's the one that's invented the concept of a true statement, because now you can also tell how a statement or a sentence is true or false. You know, because if I say, that horse is a gelding, and the person says, no, it's a mare, right? You know, clearly I'm not very knowledgeable when it comes to horses. Then this would be false. Pretty easy, right? So it's the correspondence theory. You're basically saying my statement is true or false depending on whether or not it corresponds to the actual situation that I'm describing, right? So that's pretty interesting. Now, when we start talking about Aristotle, one of the things that's very different today is that when it comes to ethics or judgments of value, he considers those judgments to be true or false, depending on whether it corresponds to the fact. In other words, at least when we go back this far to Aristotle, statements about value judgments, which is what we call them today. You know, so if I ask you the question, which song is the most beautiful, which is kind of a dumb question, right? And that came out pretty beautifully, as we all started talking about the various songs that we like. Not one person agreed with anyone else. No one said that the other song that so-and-so, because you didn't even know what songs other people said. Right? I'm looking at them and thinking, gee, that's an interesting difference from this one and this one and this one. We all had our different opinion. Now, for Plato, if we understood the ideal nature of beauty and what was beautiful in song, we ought to be converging on the same kind of thing. Kind of like when I referred to Charles Murray in his book, Human Accomplishment, right? He, by doing an analysis of the internet, search records, concluded that more people search for Beethoven or Mozart than Hayakawa or whatever, right? Pardon? Yeah, I mean, that was, of course, that's years ago. That's Charles Murray. By the way, if you're interested in doing Charles Murray, he's a very conservative philosopher, and has gotten in trouble for things like his book that he jointly wrote years ago with Bernstein, which was called The Bell Curve. Which is about intelligence, basically. And their main thesis is that the class structure in American life is going to be increasingly more and more dependent on your ability to deal with complex technological things like your devices. Someone couldn't figure out how to use one of these devices. How difficult would that be for them? You think about it, right? My class would be difficult. I mean, I don't give out paper. I didn't require a textbook, but I am encouraging you to do readings that you can find easily online if you know how to use that resource, right? So he's basically, he and Bernstein argued in this book, which was what, 94? Okay. that with the nature of our economy and technology, that more and more jobs, especially the kind of jobs that can give you the kind of life that you would like to live, if you're an American, typical American, are going to require a greater degree of intelligence. And according to the bell curve, what you end up with is a clear statistical result of some people not being as intelligent as other people, right? Which means these folks are going to be in a lower class. Yes?
Do you really like that because the dumbest amount of people are in the minority is always like the highest amount, like the highest intelligent are the minority too? Is he like saying like that?
Well, according to his statistics, theoretically, the Asian people are the ones with the highest intelligence because of the IQ tests. And in fact, that's recently been an issue for Harvard. They've been not admitting as many people of Asian descent as have actually earned admission, because it would change the student population of Harvard, skewing it towards an Asian school, basically. And so they've been breaking their own rules, and this is in the court process and everything else. They're using, tools and things in order to make sure that they still keep what they consider to be a more balanced student population. Yeah, I mean, when you look at, and the thing is, what got these folks in trouble for this book was a lot of people read the book and thought they're racist. And the thing is, if you read the book, you discover no, that's not their issue at all. In fact, if you're doing your term paper on either Charles Murray, or if you're doing it on Sam Harris, I don't know if anybody's picked Sam Harris. There's a wonderful interview on Sam Harris's podcast where he interviews Charles Murray, where he invited Charles Murray to come on the podcast to have a discussion about this book and other works. And just prior to Charles Murray's interview, Sam read the book for the first time. So he was very well aware of all the critiques about the book and everything else. And what he says in the podcast was, wow, I read all this stuff about, how racist this was. Then I read the book and realized, no, that's not it at all. And I basically, Murray argues that, if we were going to use genetics to try to associate intelligence with a particular genetic set, what we might actually need is something like 2,000 different genetic categories, as opposed to, he's one of the ones that agrees that there's only one race, the human race, that kind of approach. Yes?
Is it based on evolutionary theory?
Good question. Let me think. If more of a historical analysis, because a big part of their discussion is on really what I wanted to discuss today with regard to Aristotle, and that is, how do you raise a good child? In fact, that's my quiz question for you today. How do you raise a good child? And if we go back to Aristotle, which we should be doing, the textbook for this is usually the ethics, the Nicomachean ethics. And if you watch some of my other videos, I often ask as the alternate quiz question, who was Nicomachus? And a lot of people look up Nicomachus, and the very first one that comes up on Wikipedia was a mathematician. But if you check the dates of that mathematician, that Greek mathematician named Nicomachus, you discover that he was a couple hundred years after Aristotle. So he clearly wouldn't have been the reason that Aristotle named the ethics book Nicomachus. Who was Nicomachus? Well, we know that Aristotle's father was Nicomachus, and Aristotle's son was Nicomachus. So we don't really know. Was he honoring the father, the son, both of them? Maybe it wasn't even Aristotle that named it Nicomachean Ethics. Maybe it was someone else. There's also Eudaimonean Ethics. And there's also another ethics which they think was really not written by Aristotle, but maybe by the followers of Aristotle might have written it. The Peripatetic school. Aristotle liked to walk around while he was teaching, so one of the names for his school is the Peripatetic school, which means walking around. Well, this also gets us to the question for Aristotle of what is the good. Which ties us back into the question of what is a good song. You know, for Plato, it ought to be the case that since everything is coming from the good, and he uses the sun as the metaphor for that, but it's clearly not the actual sun that he's talking about is the good. He's using it as a metaphor, as in the allegory of the cave. Remember where, the prisoner, exits the cave and finally can see everything in the light of the sun and so on. And in that sense, the allegory also